Hey everybody, welcome to Do You Believe on Paranormal Zone TV. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We have a fabulous show tonight. I'm so excited. And my guest tonight is Carla Wills-Brandon. She has a master's degree in clinical psychology, and she has published 12 books. Well, she had too many books, so I couldn't show everybody, but we'll tell you where she can get her books after the show. And so tonight, one of her books is Heavenly Hugs. And that is our topic tonight. And it will be on Does Life End at Death and the Mythology of Death. So with that, everyone, let's welcome Carla to the show. Carla, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, thank you so much. There's ring-a-ding-ding in the background. My husband knows I'm doing your show, but he has decided to call anyway. So my son's going to hang up the phone. I really appreciate you inviting me on your show, Norene.
Oh, you know, I was searching for another guest. And I found you. I thought, forget the other guest. I want Carla.
Okay. Well, you know what? This is a topic that people are very interested in. I post these YouTube videos on my Facebook page all the time about the different aspects of after-death communication. And people are embarrassed to say that they like them. You know, when your name pops up but what I'll find is that on YouTube, the numbers are incredible. This is one of those topics that our society wants us to push to the back. I was just talking to my husband, as a matter of fact. I have to go to see the doctor. I had some surgery. I had surgeries on my leg. And the doctor who did the surgeries, he's kind of death phobic-y. And my husband mentioned something that he always likes to say. He always likes to say, my wife is an expert in the unknown. And then I look to him and say, how can you be an expert in the unknown? You're being an idiot. And then he goes, oh, yeah, how can you be an expert in the unknown? But anyway, people like this doctor, when they hear about this aspect of my life, it's almost like they throw themselves against the back of the wall. You know, it's like they don't really want to talk about it publicly. And so what I do is I provide a resource for people to, people get in contact with me from all around the world: Israel, Japan, China, Italy, Scotland, Israel, you name it. I get contact from all these different places, and what they all want to say to me is this: my mother was getting ready to pass. My minister and I were standing in the room, and there were other family members there. Suddenly we saw a mist rising from her body. The minister and I did, but nobody else in the room saw it. I don't know who to talk to about that. Where can I go for resources? And so my job is to provide people with information about this, to let them know that there are millions of other people who have had contact like this, and that they aren't alone. Or the individual who says, I had a dream that I was driving home, and in the process of driving home, I ran into a funeral. And then I asked whose funeral it was. There was a policeman, and the policeman said a name, and it was the first name of his mother. And then when he got home, he received a phone call informing him that, yes, indeed, his mother had crossed over. So people, they usually are fearful because they're afraid that they're going to be ridiculed. I mean, I get ridiculed all the time. It's sort of like my place in life with these people who are so death phobic. 100 years ago, let me tell you the way it used to be, 150 years ago. When somebody was preparing to pass, like my relatives in Russia, everybody would be around the bedside. They'd be around the bedside, you know, children, older people, younger people, friends, family. And if the person who is preparing to pass, who would be in his own bed, her own bed, with their favorite quilt, with their favorite dog at the foot of the bed, if they were having departing visions, the people around the bed would begin talking openly about this. Is that grandma? Does she have a message for me? Also during this time, discussion rotated around how the funeral was going to take place, the will, anything about the will. Old disputes oftentimes were also discussed, and there was resolution. And so death was part of the everyday landscape. So if somebody had premonitions of an upcoming passing, let me talk real quick about this woman I know. There's this woman I know who every time someone is going to pass, she has a dream about that person passing. And she hates it. She hates having this because she doesn't really know who to go talk to about it. But she has these experiences, and then, lo and behold, the people that she has the dreams about, well, they cross over. She finds out that they have crossed over. I get incredibly weepy. A really good friend of mine passed away a couple of days ago, and I have been so weepy. It's been unbelievable. And then I was informed a couple of hours ago that this person had crossed. Well, back in the day, if somebody had that ability, that was seen as normal. It wasn't seen as something that was unusual. That would be Auntie so-and-so who has the dreams that lets us know that maybe somebody's going to be crossing soon. It wouldn't be something to be afraid of. It would be shared with the children. There was this Jewish man who passed on some time ago, and he contacted me because he knew he was going to be leaving soon. He was so cute. And he talked to me about how he had always known when somebody was getting ready to cross over, and that members of his family had always come to him to talk about these things. And he had no problem sharing these events with the people of his generation. And he was an elderly man, so this would have been normal for his generation. Well, unfortunately, what has happened is that, we have hospitals and we have doctors and we have nurses, and if it wasn't for them, let me tell you something, this leg I've got right over here, I wouldn't have this leg. 4 months ago, I was in the hospital for a month, and the doctors, they saved my leg. But the sad thing is that the whole issue around death and dying kind of went out the window. They don't provide for residents enough information about hospice care and how do you deal with those who are preparing to make that journey. Another woman that I know has somebody she's taking care of who is getting ready to make the transition. And the staff keeps trying to feed this person, and the person doesn't want to eat. When people get near that time to make the journey to the spirit world, oftentimes physically they don't want to eat. It makes it harder for them to cross over if they are given food. But these helping professionals keep insisting that she eat, and they put a feeding tube down her throat. There were all sorts of problems. And finally I said, you need to contact a good hospice because they understand this. So 150 years ago, it was well known that life was continuous, that we move from this experience, this physical life, to the next leg of the journey. So people who are getting ready to pass would be visited and are visited by deceased relatives and loved ones. And I'm going to talk about that real quick.
Okay.
My mother-in-law, her mother was a Holocaust survivor, and she died in Auschwitz. And my mother-in-law never healed from that wound. Never. She was a professor of linguistics, and she was the first chair of her department. And when I wrote my first book on this topic, One Last Hug Before I Go, she refused to read it because she said she wasn't spiritual enough. So when her time came, we, of course, the boys and Michael and I and other relatives were around the bedside, and we were telling her that it was okay, that she was safe, no problem. And she started talking to Malpa. Now, Malpa is Yiddish for monkey, or it might be Polish for monkey, I can't remember. But she started talking about Malpa, and that's the nickname she had for my father-in-law. And so she started talking about Malpa this and Malpa that, and then she started saying, no, 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 I'm not going with you. And my husband said, Mom, you can go with Pop, it's okay, go. And she said, no, I'm not going. We knew she was being visited by her husband who had passed 5 years previous to this. Even a rabbi friend who has seen lots of departing visions where the deceased come to escort loved ones to the next world, to a spirit world, to an afterlife. The conversation is always the same, regardless of the religion, the age, regardless of the illness. Even if a person is an atheist, they can have these experiences. Even he said, Elizabeth, go. It's okay, you can go. Well, long story short, we were really, really tired. We had watched for a day as she fought with my father-in-law about not wanting to go. And so we came home to take care of our children, and I got very weepy all of a sudden, and I knew that my mother-in-law had moved on or was preparing to move on this time for sure. And so we went back to the hospital, and she was crying, and she was looking in the distance, and she was talking in Polish. We had to have her sister come and interpret for us. And she was talking to her mother, who had passed in the camps. And there was this huge reunion that was taking place. And the wound of a lifetime, the loss of a mother, was healing. And shortly after that, she peacefully moved on. So that's the type of experience those that are preparing to move on can have, where they will start talking about going home. That's very common also. They'll talk about going home. I want to go home. One man said to me, I kept telling my mother, you're home, you're home. What are you talking about? And she said, not this home, home, home. And so oftentimes we'll hear a conversation about wanting to go home, or we'll hear a conversation about what the other side looks like. It's beautiful. It's indescribable. The colors are so bright here. We'll hear conversation. There's the Greek, the Greek reunion where this Greek woman was preparing to pass, and she was talking to people who had passed as if they were present in the physical, while she talked to people in the physical. And she told someone in the physical to go get her cousin a glass of water. So it was a grand reunion. They had all shown up to escort her to the other side.
Wow.
So, that is the experience that the person who is making the transition can have. They can also have what's called a deathbed stare, where they start looking into a corner of the room or tracking something up on the ceiling or on the wall. Then they can turn, and they're very lucid, and they can have a conversation with whoever's in the room. Now, we can also have these experiences, and this is kind of how I got into all this. When I was 15, my girlfriends and I went to see Sly and the Family Stone. Now, Sly liked to do a few chemicals, so of course he was late for the show.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And wonderful musician, very chemically dependent. I started feeling really sick while we were waiting for him. And there was an ambulance on the grounds, and so I went over to the ambulance and I crawled in. I asked, can I just lay down for a minute? And then when I woke up, it was time to go home. And when I got home, I asked where my mother was, and I was told she had been taken away by ambulance to the hospital. And what I discovered was that at the exact moment I was crawling into an ambulance, she was being put into an ambulance. That's called an empathetic departing vision, where we in the physical can feel our loved one across town, across the country, in a different country. We can feel them going through the process of physically dying. So I have accounts where people felt like they were having a heart attack, and then they, learned later on that one of their loved ones had a heart attack in a different location. So that was my very first experience, but of course, by then, the death phobia thing had kind of kicked in society. Some of that had to do with the Holocaust, World War II. That actually is going to be my next project, is taking a closer look at that, at how those events impacted our sense of spirituality, how so much physical death on such a massive quantity. I've talked to Holocaust survivors who have said, if there was a God, why did this happen? Mm-hmm. Or to mothers who had fathers who were in the Korean War, or who were in World War II, or even those involved with the Vietnam War. And of course, we have a whole slew of folks coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and I work with a lot of vets, and there's a lot of grief and emotion and anger there, and I think that we can't have spirituality if we don't work through our grief issues and process that stuff out. But anyway, my mother, she was 38. She had breast cancer. It moved to her pancreas, and she passed. She passed shortly after that, and I woke up at the exact moment of her passing, and I knew intuitively that she had moved on. And I put on my slippers and I went downstairs and I waited for the phone call to hear. And I got the phone call and was told that she had moved on. And of course I tucked that away because there wasn't anybody to talk to about that. I mentioned it to one of my grandparents and they shushed it. They pushed it aside. Well, fast forward, I'm a clinician and I'm working with severe trauma. And my husband and I are working with things like when the Challenger space shuttle blew up and other traumatic events around the country. And I go back to California where I'm originally from, and I'm sitting with a good family friend, and we're talking about my mother. And he says, something strange happened. And I said, something strange? And I said, well, let me tell you what happened with me. And I told him what happened. And he said, I woke up at the exact moment of your mother's passing, and so did another friend of ours named Anne. So now that's 3 of us who've awoken at the exact moment of my mother's passing. Well, God love Facebook. A couple of years ago, I posted this story on Facebook. And immediately my cousin is sending me a message. My cousin in California, and she says, you're not going to believe this. But not only did I wake up at the exact moment of your mom's passing, but so did your aunt. So that's 5 of us who awoke at that moment.
Was your mother by herself when she died then?
My mother was definitely by herself. Sadly by herself. She was in a hospital room. She was hooked up to tubes. We were not allowed to visit her. I was snuck in as a child by this other friend who had the experience that I had.
Well, they say that some hospital workers, hospice, can also see the passing of a loved one. Now, was anybody in the room with her?
No, and hospice Hospice really wasn't around back then.
Oh, okay.
This is a long, long time ago. So
what about this mist? What about this mist? What is that? Do you know? What is that? Why a mist, and why a mist?
In the 1920s, early 1900s, there was a guy who was a physicist named Sir William Barrett. And Sir William Barrett was a horrible skeptic. and he was married to a woman who was a gynecological surgeon. And back then, women used to pass giving birth to children. That was not unusual.
Right.
And what his doctor wife began to notice was that some of these women would see a mist either forming at the foot of their bed, which would evolve into someone they knew who had been deceased for a while, who had come to take them away. Or what would happen is, as they themselves were passing, a mist would begin to leave their bodies, and a body double in a couple of the accounts actually formed above them, with a cord connected between the body double and the woman who was passing.
And this was actually seen?
This was seen and documented. So, also there were conversations from these women about knowing other family members who had passed and nobody had told them. So I'm going to go close my door real quick because my son has come home and he's very loud. Just real quick.
Okay.
Take me 1 second here.
All right. You know, if anybody...
Sorry about that.
If anyone in the chat room has questions for Carla, we'll take them after she talks about this topic. Send them to... and Royce, would you send them to me on Facebook, please? So type up your questions, and Royce will send them to me when we're ready to take questions, okay? Welcome back, Carla.
I'm back. So there were these two Icelandic psychologists who were very interested in Barrett's work because Barrett became a believer. He, after seeing this enough times, after hearing this enough times from these women, he became a believer. Well, a guy named Carlos Osis decided that he was going to do a pilot study on these departing visions. And so what he did is he put together a questionnaire to pass out to medical doctors and nurses who are at the bedside of the dying. And instead of using deathbed vision, departing vision, he talked about the hallucination. Have you ever witnessed a hallucination with a person who is preparing to cross? And what he discovered was that a number of these people also had experiences of seeing somebody at the foot of the bed, but he also learned that family and healthcare workers had also seen this mist rising from the person who was crossing over and passing. And so then his friend, Erlinger Haraldson, who is still alive, the two of them put together a huge study with tens of thousands of people, not only in America, but in India. And what they did is they passed out this inventory, and they found pretty much the same thing, that the dying were seeing or having dreams about deceased loved ones coming to take them to an afterlife experience, and that if they were a difficult patient beforehand, they would calm down after these experiences, that this wasn't the byproduct of a dying brain, that it had nothing to do with, as I said before, the type of illness the person was passing from, but that there were lots of individuals who were having these experiences. And so, fast forward, there have been people in Ireland who have looked at this, of course, more people in the United Kingdom who have looked at this, and I have an entire chapter on this in one of my books called A Glimpse of Heaven. My husband saw a mist rising from his father as his father was passing, and it was a pastel mist. And so there are lots of theories about this mist. Some people think it's the soul, it's the life force, it's the essence. Another cousin had the same experience where she saw the mist rising from her mother. And these are not people who are they don't read information. about this sort of stuff. For years, my husband thought I was a nutcase because I was so interested in these things. But there are lots and lots of people who have come forward and they've said things like, I have a full-time job, I'm raising my family, I have all my teeth, I'm not making this stuff up. I saw something leave my husband, wife, son, daughter, parents' body at the moment of passing. And I'm convinced for sure now that life continues.
So at the moment of passing, when they saw this mist, did the individual that was actually dying, did they say, when they were in the room, did they say, did they say hello to a loved one that is greeting them? Did they say hello to a sister or a brother that was in the room and say, oh, hi, and talking with them?
Now, they have done the talking, and I've witnessed that on numerous occasions, where I will be sitting in one part of the room and they will be carrying on a conversation with, what are you doing here? Or there was one woman who was upset because her husband came to collect her and she was expecting her son. So they can have these conversations. I've been so caught up in the conversation, I've never seen the mist leaving at that time. Mm-hmm. But most definitely, they do have these conversations.
And and it's really strange. When my sister died, I wasn't there, but my nieces were, and my sister actually said to my two nieces, "I'm dying." She knew she was dying, and I had never heard that before. And she was talking with her cousin. Nan. She called her Nan. This was way back when we were back east, and she was talking with her. Now, what I thought was kind of strange was why Nan, she hadn't seen in years, instead of her husband or her mother or father.
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said something very wise. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote the first modern-day definitive book on death and dying. And she talked about the stages of grief that the dying can go through, and that also those of us that are at the bedside can go through. She had a whole chapter devoted to near-death experiences, leaving the body, going to the tunnel, or having some sort of experience when one comes close to passing. The departing vision, which happens right before a passing, and then the after-death communication, where we get messages from our loved ones in spirit after they have passed, either in dream form or they manifest in front of us. And what she said was, now of course that chapter wasn't included in her book because it was seen as the publishers didn't think it was wise. And she always had a resentment about that. But she said that those who come to collect us are the ones who we need to see.
Really?
That's what she said. And I believe that. Just like the woman who, she wanted her son to come and collect her, but for some reason she needed to see her husband. But then there was my mother-in-law who, her husband came to her, but who she really needed to see was her mother. So this is one of those unknowns that can't be completely fettered out. I have an idea of who it is that I'd like to see when my time comes. I will tell you that my mother didn't come to me for decades. It took decades. And I had contact and communication from lots of other people who had passed on, but I did not have contact from my mother. And then she finally showed up. And it was time. Maybe it was her time. Maybe it was my time to receive her message. I'm not real sure. So it is one of those things that we can't nail down.
Now, was that through a dream?
No, this is with a medium friend of mine.
Oh, okay.
who helped me out. Now, I did have immediate contact in a dream with my grandmother. I was very upset with her passing. She had been my second mother. And so I had this dream where I was in her very white kitchen. And she came into the kitchen and she was wearing a very sparkly purple dress. And I could hear the click of the heels of her high heels. She walked up to me, grabbed me by the shoulders. She didn't say, "Oh, I love you, and everything's going to be wonderful, and I miss you, and everything's peachy keen." She grabbed me by the shoulders and she said, "Get over it." And as a medium, I can tell you that often happens. People expect an "I love you," and they will receive a message, a very down-to-earth message, but this came in an after-death communication, and she was like, "Get back to your family and your sons, get over it." And that was it. And then she turned around and walked out. So, okay.
Now, is the scientific community coming around to that these are not hallucinations, that these are real visions?
Depending on the hospice worker, a lot of hospice workers are they are life-saving. I had a man who contacted me, and he was dying. He was in the process of dying, and he was having departing visions. And he tried to tell his doctor about it, and his doctor said, "You need more medication." And then the doctor went to his family and said, "He needs more medication." And it was very upsetting to him. And so my suggestion was to look for a hospice group that was open to hearing about departing visions, because not all hospice groups are like this. And so I think that there are hospice groups out there who are very familiar with this, but then there are those groups that they will hand family a piece of paper, and all it says is, "Your loved one might start having hallucinations about dead people." There are people in the scientific community that I know who actually research this stuff. There's a guy named Jeffrey Long. He's a physician he's living in Louisiana. He's a best-selling author, and he has the largest collection of near-death experiences. And so he statistically analyzes them, and then there are other people. There are a number of physicists who are looking into quantum physics as a way of explaining some of these experiences that people have. And then there are other doctors too, who are very involved, along with academics, people who are with academia. A bunch of us got together actually in Arizona last summer at a conference, and we all presented our findings, and then got caught up with each other. And these were people, actually some of them were from out of this country. There are people who are, like I said, there's a woman in Ireland who has been working with a psychiatrist in the UK, and what they have been doing is they have been working with nursing homes and collecting these accounts to see what the commonalities are. Then there's the VA. There's a VA group in California that's looking at vets who are passing and looking at their departing visions. So, slowly, very slowly, more and more and more of the scientific community are taking a look at this. But then you have a couple of those skeptics that come along, and they get on television and they talk about what wackos the rest of us are, and our death-phobic society, those individuals who have had these experiences, they don't know where to go, they question their reality. It's very frustrating right now. That's what I'm going to say. It's incredibly frustrating.
I read an article last night. I found this other website on life after life, and that and they said that the consciousness continues beyond death. And in this article, they said that at the moment of death, you stop breathing, you lose the oxygen to the brain, but your brain cells don't die. It might take possibly several hours before all the neons in your brain dies. So if your body is dead, but your brain is still alive, is still going, it's still active, what happens within those couple of hours? Is that the time, do you think, that when a loved one will experience the vision of, say, a grandfather visiting them and letting them know, or saying hi, or just visiting them, and then they get a phone call that, hey, your grandpa just died about an hour ago?
Well, that is up for debate, because these occurrences, some of them happen, a person can have a departing vision a week, a month before actually passing. So one woman who I know who's in hospice care, she is currently, her brother keeps coming. He keeps coming and having conversations with her. And this has been going on for a month.
And he's not dead yet?
No, he's passed.
Oh.
He's been passed for quite a while. This is a departing vision. And she is seeing him. And he is letting her know that everything is going to be okay. And so her mother asked me, why does she keep talking to her brother? She's talking to her brother all of the time. And she's telling me her brother is here. And I said to her, well, that's because her brother is probably there, and he's going to be the one who escorts her to the other side. So
that's not hallucination. She's not hallucinating this. I mean, she really believes that she's talking to her brother.
Let me tell you about hallucinations, because I work with a lot of people who hallucinate. If I have 10 people who come into my office suffering from hallucinations, each hallucination is going to be different and specific to that person. And my job will be to somehow blend with their reality in order to find out what's going on. Okay? So each person will have a different type of hallucination. When somebody has a departing vision, the experience, okay, if I have 10 people who have departing visions come into my office, or I go visit them in the hospital, there's going to be incredible consistency. The people they will be talking to will all be deceased. The people they will be talking to will be there to let them know things are going to be okay. The people they are talking to, for the most part, will talk about escorting them to some sort of afterlife experience. There will be a calming effect for the most part. Sometimes there isn't, but for the most part there is. So what we look at with the departing vision is that there is incredible consistency from person to person in the experience. Whereas with a hallucination, it's not consistent at all. It's very, with a hallucination, people will talk about seeing folks who are alive. They will talk about the mailman. They will talk about entities from wherever. They will talk about a variety of different things from person to person. So that's the thing that I always look at with the departing vision. For those who remain here in the physical, for them, the departing vision will be consistent. If 10 people who are sitting at the bedside with somebody who's preparing to pass come in to tell me about their departing visions, it will always involve a deceased person. It'll involve an I'm okay, I love you, everything's going to be all right. If it's a hallucination, it will not be that. So that's really important to note, is that the difference between the two.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And not now. What have you ever been with someone that was afraid to die and they were scared to death. Does that ever happen at the time of death, that they're afraid to die?
All the time.
And so, do they ever get a vision from anyone? Well, trying to take them with them to the other side.
If they do have a vision, the fear of death evaporates. If they do have a vision.
But they don't always.
But not always.
Oh my.
Not always. Or they may have a vision, and they may be in coma, or they may be have Alzheimer's, or there may be something else going on. They may have a vision and we just don't know about it. Mm-hmm. There are different types of statistics that suggest that maybe 40% of those who are preparing to pass that have obvious departing visions. But then there are those cases where we just don't know. We may not know. If a person has a sudden heart attack, we're not going to know. So, but maybe somebody who survives them will have some sort of experience where they have a premonition that that loved one will pass. Mm-hmm. Science right now, I will tell you that I tried to replicate the research of the Icelandic psychologists in a great big medical hospital, and it was impossible. It was absolutely impossible. They were not interested in replicating that. So finding places to do this research can be really, really difficult. Now, other diseases, which of course are important, that's where all the money goes to. But taking a look at something like a departing vision, I got a big thumbs down on that. And I tried.
Really? No, also in this article that I read, and this was a group of, a panel of scientists in New York Academy of Sciences. Uh-huh. And they had taken a survey on 2,000 people who had experienced cardiac arrest.
Oh, I know this research.
Do you know that one? And 330 survived, and of those survivors, 140 reported to at least partial awareness of the time of recitation. No. How do you pronounce that? Resuscitation, yes. And nearly half, 46%, had memories with 7 major themes. I'm telling the viewers. And there was fear, animals, plants, bright light, violence, which I was surprised, persecution, deja vu, and family, and then recalling the events, I guess, after their cardiac arrest, where they could see their body above them, on the side, and as well as underneath.
Right. That was a research study done on near-death experiences. And what they did is they interviewed people who had cardiac arrest because they wanted to see if they had these experiences. I had a friend years ago, she's passed. Her name was Dr. Barbara Romer, and she was, I think she might have been a general practitioner or a cardiologist, I can't remember. But she did research on what are called hellish near-death experiences. Where people would have some sort of illness and they would have an event, some sort of event. They would see their bodies, they'd be floating above their bodies. Some of them would go toward the light. Others saw hellish scenes, frightening scenes, persecution. And what's interesting about this, what she learned was that people who had these hellish experiences, in the end, basically learned something from those experiences. They learned, maybe their life, they weren't really paying attention to life. They were paying attention to the wrong things. They were not being compassionate towards others. And so that the hellish experiences served a purpose. And so I know that second research was done. I had a near-death experience a couple of years ago, and it was not the typical near-death experience. I was in the hospital and I was dying, and it was from a condition that I have, and I found myself watching people go into some room, and I couldn't go in that room. And the colors were very, very bright, and I saw my uncle, and I saw my mother, and I saw my grandfather. I saw all three of them, and they were standing next to a bright, bright light that led to a sort of like opening, tunnelish sort of scene. And then I heard the voice of some wise man, and the wise man was talking, and I knew it was for my greater good, but I couldn't really hear what he was saying. Now, at the time of the experience, I understood what he was saying, but I couldn't understand. It's hard to put into words. So, people there are different types of near-death experiences. There's the classic one where someone comes close to dying, they leave their bodies, they go towards a bright light, travel through a tunnel, they're greeted by deceased loved ones, they're greeted by a light being, they receive a message. Oftentimes a message is given to them that sounds very strange. They don't understand what is being said, but they know what was said. Then they come back and they come to. Then you have other people who just leave their bodies and float above their bodies. Mm-hmm. Then you have other people. One woman I work with, she saw 3 light beings in the room and bright light. More physicians are beginning to take a look at the near-death experience, which is a really good thing. The person who really began investigating that is a friend of mine, and in the 70s, Raymond Moody started investigating the near-death experience. And since then, he's also taken a look at departing visions, after-death communications. I went to his house years ago with Barbara Romer and a few others, and he talked to us about something called the psychomantium. And the psychomantium is a way to make afterlife contact. Oh. And I was able to make afterlife contact, a full manifestation of all friends and loved ones who had moved on and they were in energy, spirit form. But he was the godfather of all of that. And so since then, his work is being taken more seriously. And so you have these research studies, but I think that sometimes they don't go the full, they don't go all the way and take a look at everything like the hellish near-death experiences and take a look at what do those really mean, and what was the persecution? What was that? Was that a near-death experience, or was that something else?
Yeah, I have heard that before. There was an interview I had seen where he had a near-death experience, but his was not good. It was a black hole, and he was scared to death.
Yeah.
And so he's afraid to die. That man is afraid to die.
And so he needs someone to help him process that out. And that's what Barbara used to do. Barbara and a few others. If someone had a hellish near-death experience, they need, even a person who has a good near-death experience or any kind of afterlife contact, they need someone to help them process that out, because it can turn your world upside down, totally and completely upside down. A lot of people will have problems after a near-death experience. And so this poor guy, he really needed some help. But finding the help is really difficult, because how many clinicians are there out there who know how to talk about this stuff? Mm-hmm. And so I know my husband and I, we know how to do that, and we have colleagues who know how to do that. But a lot of times people will contact me to see if I can find somebody for them that they can go see and work with to process out a near-death experience, departing vision, or afterlife communication.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody is an atheist and they don't have a religion, they don't believe in God or whatever, does anything change for them?
Well,
Do we all go to the same place? Do we all go to the same place?
Well, a person, there are different theories about that. Some believe and theorize that we all are part of different soul groups, and that when we cross over, of course, we reunite with those we love, but then the journey continues. It doesn't end. We don't go sit on a mountain with a harp. That's just not the way it works. We continue to grow and evolve, and some of us actually become helpers, and we help those who are here in the physical. So what we're doing, it's like moving from one state to another. The landscape's different, and the job's a bit different, but we continue on. We We have tasks and we have a mission, and we're engaged.
Carla, I can't tell you how many different, from all the guests that I've had on the show, and they all seem to say something different.
Well,
they all say something different.
Well, they'll say things like, you all go to the light, or you all go to this one dimension, or you all go, and some of them even complicate the cornflakes to such an extent that, personally, why would I want to cross over? As a medium, I can tell you that the information that I've received and that my friends have received who are mediums is that the journey continues. That we don't get struck good, that we don't come face to face with God. We don't, there are just a lot of things that people say about the afterlife that is so complicated. If you think about it realistically, how can that be true? How can that make any sense?
Now one person said to me that we are like the movie The Others. The movie The Others, how the spirits are living in the same world with the humans, and to the others, to the spirit, we're the ghost. And they continue on just doing whatever. They're cooking, they're having a good time. Now, I like that one. I really like that explanation. Because if we could... And then one told me that when we want to come back, when we want to reincarnate, if that's possible... And I said, well, what time zone do we come back in? Do we come back into the extreme future where we might be up in Mars or something? Or how does that work? And they said, well, you can pick a time slot. If you like the 60s, you can come back into the 60s. Or whatever time slot that you prefer or want. And I thought, well, I really like that explanation.
Well, we're talking about service here. Okay, there are different theories about reincarnation, and one theory is that we reincarnate because we come back to do service, to be of service, or we come back because there's something that we need to clean up, that we want to polish about ourselves. There are individuals who, it's kind of like, I hear some people talk about, it's almost like it's a carnival, pick your ride, and then that's what's going to happen to you. What I have gotten from those on the other side that I have met in working with people, sitters who have wanted to make contact, is that their journey continues. that they continue to spiritually evolve, they continue to learn, they continue to grow. Let me put it this way. I have a cousin who called me. She was very, very upset. She was dying. And she said to me, my husband, your cousin, is not going to let me die in peace. You need to talk to him. You need to talk to him. You need to be there for him. And I agreed to that. I said, I'll do that. No problem. And so what I did is I helped him more. She was fine with passing, no problem. But what I did is I helped him through the journey. They had what was called a shared departing vision. And in this shared departing vision, both of them were laying on the bed, and all of a sudden, a light opened up above them. And the two of them found themselves moving up a tunnel toward a brighter light. And at the end of this tunnel were her deceased relatives. And what they did is they said, we're going to show you what it's like over here. And so they showed her places of learning, and they showed her places where they live. They gave her a little bit of information about how it works. And then they said to him, but you won't be coming with her. Only she will be coming. We just thought that you might want to know where she'll be living when she crosses over. And so, once again, the message was spiritually evolving, learning, growing, being with people we care about, being with soul groups, being challenged with things, different challenges. We have challenges here in the physical all the time, and so we will have our challenges there. We will be able to talk with our soul group, with our mentors and our guides about, do we want to reincarnate, if that's something that is in our higher good. And I've heard that pretty consistently, from others that I've worked with. So I don't know everything. There may be more that I don't know. I'm sure there is more that I don't know. But it can get really confusing when people provide a lot of different ideas, theories.
Yeah, it is. It is, because everybody tells you something different, and I really don't know. And then I heard the other day somebody, I don't know if I read it or was watching a YouTube video, that when we die, we have no memory, and we go into a sleep until the higher up, or God or whatever, is ready to bring us above. But we go into a sleep and we know nothing. And that when we do go up to where we're supposed to go, or wherever God puts us, we have no memory of our living life. So therefore, they said that when you're getting like EVPs off of a digital voice recorder, that it's not really a loved one that you're talking to. It's probably a demonic entity or something else, that somebody's playing tricks on you.
Wow. Okay, first of all, I've been to funerals where the departed has shown up. And I've collected lots of accounts where children and people of all ages have made contact with the departed. It's always fun. I had one guy who showed up, and we were gossiping. And then there are also those experiences where when somebody crosses over, immediately they show up in a loved one's bedroom, telling them that they're okay and they're fine and they love them. Or the experience I had with my grandmother, which was just weeks after she passed. So I don't know about that. Now, as far as we do have different types of, it's not communication, but I live on an island which is full of Victorian houses. 1900, we had a storm that came through here where 9,000 people perished. In a lot of our houses, we have what are called loops, where certain voices can be heard or picked up with EVP, and they say the same thing over and over again. It's kind of like the white lady who comes dressed in white, who comes to the window, every night. That's a loop.
I never heard that before.
That is an impression. That is an impression of trauma on the environment.
Well, as far as an EVP, I've never heard that about a loop. I've never heard that expression before.
Yeah, it's a loop. And so then in this house, it's 100 years old. And so when we first moved in here, we smelled the strong scent of roses. And I found out later that the original owner, what she did is there are no roses growing around here, but she had dried rose petals everywhere. And this was validated by her son-in-law. And so she had come to visit just to see who had moved into the house. That was different. She left, never smelled roses again. So I think that when the same thing is happening over and over again, the same voice, the same message, the same manifestation, the woman or the man crossing the road over and over again every night at midnight, that's a loop. And so I think a lot of people get real confused about that stuff. Contact with those in the afterlife. I had an office that was in another 100-year-old house, and there was a spirit who scared one of my patients. And I told this spirit, I said, you can stay here. I don't really care. But if you're going to scare my patients, you're going to have to go. And he stopped scaring my patients. I have another house now that's in North Carolina, way up in the mountains. And there was a guy who owned the house who was most likely alcoholic, who would cause a few problems. And so it's the same thing. It's like having a bad neighbor, it's just like, knock it off, quit, stop. We can get along together or you're going to have to go. And so looking at people are people, even when they cross over. We take ourselves to the other side. We take our personalities to the other side. There are individuals who have problems, and when they cross over, they have to work on some of these problems, or they go through a life review, and they learn during the life review with a mentor or a guide, they learn something about what it was that went on for them in the physical. But I don't think it's that complicated.
Now, you've had visitations, and you said they manifested. You got these spirits to manifest to you.
Well,
did you talk with them? Did you have conversations with them?
Well, at the time, I think I was so blown away. Let's see. Raymond Moody was studying the psychomantium, which is based on the old Greek experience, old Hellenistic experience of going to moving water or looking in a bowl of water and seeing if we can see the future or make contact with deceased relatives or loved ones. And so the oracle would go to the running water in the cave and sit and look into that water, and it would be pitch black, and see if they could make contact. So it was one of his things he was studying. And so he built these psychomantiums into his house, which consisted of a pitch black room with, let's see, a chair and a mirror, and that was it.
Oh, yeah.
And you couldn't see anything. It was pitch black. So my grandmother had passed, and that's when I was lamenting and grieving, and so I went into a couple of them. One of them is built into his house. It's like a cave, and Diane Sawyer actually went into it. And so I went into the first three, and then we had a light dinner. No alcohol, no drugs were allowed. And I was going to go turn in. I was really tired, and then I decided to go check out the last psychomantium. And so I went upstairs, and I got into it, and I heard Raymond in the next room talking about domestic stuff like sprinklers or something. I don't remember. There was something very domestic. And all of a sudden, and I couldn't see the mirror. I couldn't even see the chair I was sitting in. But all of a sudden, all of this light started coming out of this mirror. And it just poured out. And then the light became orbs. And then the orbs became vectors. And then one of the tutors came by and popped in and asked me if I was okay. And I said, well, I'm making contact. And I said, it's pretty overwhelming. And she said, do you want to stop? And I said, no, I don't want to stop. And so when she left, I just said to myself, well, what can I learn from this? And then it started up again. And then the energy, it went straight through my heart. And it was the most powerful experience of love I've ever had. And I couldn't talk about it for 5 years. And so I just sat there. Of course, the temperature in the psychomantium had dropped both times, and it had become very chilly. And as they began to manifest into form, this guy came in and said, it's my turn to use this psychomantium, blah, blah, blah. And so I didn't get to see the manifestation, but it was an incredibly powerful experience. And I think I have the whole account in A Glimpse of Heaven. But as I said, it was something I couldn't talk about for 5 years.
Wow. When this room is being used and the spirit may manifest, do you know of anybody having contact or a conversation with that manifestation?
No. It was like an unspoken. It was like I knew what they were saying and thinking.
Oh, really?
And that's the way it's been with other forms of afterlife contact. I mean, I knew it was all my family, and it was friends, and I knew that they had crossed, and I knew that they had come to reassure me and let me know that they were okay, and they were all there for me, and that part was incredibly overwhelming.
Interesting. Now, some people during their lifetime may never ever have a contact with not only a loved one, but any spirit at all. But then there are others that do. Why does that happen? Why can't everybody have a contact?
I think there are a lot of theories about that. The first theory is, remember I said that 150 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, death was not seen as something to be afraid of. Actually, I have a book that was written by a famous researcher, and it was about contact during World War I. And back then, they didn't have cell phones. They didn't have, you couldn't phone, make a quick phone call, and soldiers would be in tents. And one soldier saw his sister manifested, who was supposed to be back in England, walk through his tent. And then 3 months later, he received a letter informing him that she had passed on.
Wow.
So back then, as I said, this sort of thing was not seen as unusual. It has only become unusual within the last 100 to 150 years.
Well, in those days, too, in the Victorian era, they had no problem at all with postmortem photography.
Oh,
no. But today, oh yeah, I know. But today, there's no way. I think there's a few people that still do that, but
there are cultures that do that.
Yeah, but
my grandmother took pictures of my uncle's coffin as soon as it came back. And then, like I said, there are cultures that still do that, but that's a rarity.
Mm-hmm.
That's very, very rare, because death and dying is pushed to the corner. And so we have a society that's very death phobic, and we have a youth society that's very phobic about aging, because aging leads to death.
Yeah.
And so that's why there's so much money made with the youth culture. And that's why things are turned so upside down. And I think that as long as we go in this direction, it's going to continue. I mean, I've had young women come in who have had facelifts. You know, they're like in their 30s and they've had facelifts. You know, every wrinkle is a crisis.
Yeah.
And, people who are older are seen as dumb and stupid.
Oh God, yeah. Tell me about it. Yep.
Yeah. Which is really,
you know, like, and they really do have a thing against older people. They really do, and I've seen it. I've seen some of the comments I've seen on YouTube and on Facebook. They really do. There's a thing about old age.
And it's really scary too, because this generation, as they age, they're going to have real problems. The children of these generations are experiencing death phobia. They are carrying the death phobia of their parents. And so their parents will bring in their child, and they will be confused as to why their child is so afraid of death. And there will be a grandfather or somebody who's preparing to pass, and it's not a loving experience. It's not, you know, with my mother-in-law, she was a royal pain, but we were there for her. She was beginning her journey. Anytime somebody is making that journey, if they ask me to be there, I'm going to be there.
But there's also
nothing scary about it.
There's also a disrespect. There's also a disrespect. The younger people have a disrespect for older people.
And it's all based on fear. It's all fear. Because if they acknowledge older people, then they have to acknowledge aging, and then they have to acknowledge their own mortality. And so that's something that they don't want to get into. And periodically I get that in my office. And, you know, it's always really sad when some really young person comes in and they have all these phobias about aging. And I'm seeing it more and more.
You know, you had mentioned earlier about victims of the Holocaust, how so many people had died horrible deaths, that horrible time with all those poor victims. What do you pick up from that? Do any of them come back to their loved ones and
well, there's all kinds.
Go ahead.
Well, there are lots of accounts. I have an account. I have a Facebook site called Jewish Afterlife Experiences.
You do?
And on that Facebook page, I also have a Facebook page called Deathbed Visions or Departing Visions and Afterlife. But on the Jewish site, I have a couple of accounts from Holocaust survivors who have had near-death experiences and some of the things that they have seen and encountered and experienced. And I really do believe that their experiences are the same as anybody else's. But when you have such a massive loss of life, such a huge loss of life, there are going to be people who heal, and then there are going to be people who don't. My aunt she didn't go back to Auschwitz until she was 83. And a bunch of us in the family went back with her. And it was the most empowering experience for her to go back there and to tell us the story about how she survived that ordeal, and how she survived with her family that did survive. And when I was out there at Auschwitz, the feeling that I got was, it was one of the worst feelings, impressions I've ever had in my life, especially in different parts of the camp. And then listening to her talk about what she had to do to survive. So there's an energy there that's trapped, for sure.
How old was she at that time?
She was 19.
Oh.
So she was married and she lost her first husband. Her mother, she and her mother were in a line, and the line split off into two directions, and one was towards the gas chambers and one was for labor. And the mother figured this out really quick. Her name was Hasia. And what she did is she pushed my aunt into the line for labor, and she herself stayed in the line for the gas chambers, and that's how she saved her daughter. And so for a long time, Nunu just was so full of grief. She didn't know how to deal with it. She didn't know how to recover from it. And going to Auschwitz, as for so many survivors, that's what it took for her. And so those who have gone out there and have made peace, have no fear of death. Actually, my aunt talks a lot about, I'm ready, I'm not scared, no problem. Whereas for my mother-in-law, it took the brink of death for her to make peace. So anytime anybody goes through any kind of tragedy, if they don't heal from that tragedy, what's going to happen is that's going to create a basis for some death phobia.
What about those that maybe commit suicide? Is there any difference for them?
People have all kinds of philosophies about that. In my entire 30 plus years working with trauma, I've had 2 clients commit suicide. Both of them were drug overdoses, and both of them were very tortured individuals. They had abuse history that they just couldn't get to, that they couldn't work on. And so one was a 16-year-old girl, and we used to talk about it. She talked to me about how she wanted to commit suicide. And I would tell her, that's your choice, but there will be others left behind you who will have to clean up that mess. And there will be some feelings for you to deal with once you cross over. You'll have to take a look at some of that. We talked about it, and we talked about it. And then she moved. And she was in a situation where there were lots of drugs available. And she did end up overdosing, and she killed herself. And so I have a really good friend who is a really good medium. And so we were doing readings on each other. And all of a sudden, she felt the presence of this young person. And what came through was I wasn't to feel guilty for her suicide. And what I said back was, well, no, I don't feel guilty for your suicide, but I feel very sad. And then she said, well, don't feel sad for me because I'm doing okay. But then what also came through was that she was having to deal with it. She was having to deal with all the issues she hadn't addressed in the physical. She was having to deal with it in the spirit. And I really do believe that's how it works. That if we don't take care of business in the physical, it'll still be there for us in the spirit. And we'll learn from it. Just as we would have learned from it if we had taken care of it in the physical.
Wow.
I see a lot of things online that really tick me off about people who commit suicide, and they go to the lower level and blah, blah, blah. And some of the stuff I read I think is just horrific because I know it doesn't work that way.
What about those that are brutally murdered and tortured?
That's one more thing. If somebody is a rape victim and goes through trauma in the physical, and they come to my office, there's a process for working through that. And it's hard, and it's painful, and there's grief and anger and shame involved. And if they do the work, they can get to the other side. And I personally myself have had to do that sort of work. With something like that moves to the other side, they go to the other side, they will have helpers over there who will help them work through all that. They won't just be out there by themselves having to confront this. We all have helpers who help us day to day, those little nudges that we feel. And so on the other side, we have those who are mentors who will help us through some of this stuff. I truly, truly believe that.
And what about the ones that do commit those horrible crimes?
They are responsible. I've been sober. I became addicted to prescription drugs because I have Crohn's disease. And 32 years ago, I had to detox off of all those pharmaceuticals. I was not taking them the way I was supposed to. Both my parents were chemically dependent, so genetically I was, primed for this. But while I was in my disease, I did some things that weren't very nice. I was not a real nice person. And so what I had to do when I got sober was I had to make restitution, I had to take responsibility, and I had to make amends. And so for those individuals who commit heinous crimes, they have the choice. They have the choice. They are given the choice as to whether or not they choose to work on this and clean this up. And if they choose to not do so, well, it'd be just like choosing to not, it would be like me continuing to use in the physical and continuing to be offensive and abusive to others in the physical.
All right, we have some questions, Carla.
Sure.
Okay, we have a question from Chuck Thurston. So a question I have, what if the person that comes to you on death isn't someone you have any connection whatsoever? Do you trust them?
Sometimes what happens is that some spiritual entity will show up and the person won't know who they are. And these are the common themes, the lady in white. Sometimes what will happen is a child will show up, and that's a child from that individual's childhood, and they can't put it together right away. So yes, what will happen is that individual will be scared. I mean, they're going to be frightened. They're seeing somebody in their room, and they don't know who they are. Oftentimes, if they are willing to talk to their family who is there at the bedside, the family can go look some of this stuff up, go check it out. There was a case with a friend of mine whose father had passed, and had passed before his children were born. And the son came to him and started talking about seeing somebody all the time and described this individual. And of course the parents just sort of blew it off. They didn't make much of it. Well, then the child went to a photo album and was looking through it and then pointed to the father's father and said, "This is who I am seeing." So oftentimes what can happen is it's the human communication again. Oftentimes there can be those situations where the person who is preparing to pass is not in a place where they're remembering people from years ago. And that's the person who is showing up. Remember when I talked about how Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said that the person that we need to show up will be the one who shows up, not the one we necessarily want?
Right.
Well, if that's the case, and then the whole thing about the woman in white, boy, I collected a lot of those accounts. And there's no answer to that. I don't have an answer to that. So I don't know if that is some type of spiritual entity that is just someone who comes to collect. I know that my son had a departing vision about when his grandfather was preparing to pass. He started talking about Damas. Damas this, Damas that, Damas is sitting next to me. Damas has red hair. He's this kid sitting next to me. Damas, 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 Damas. I never saw Damas, but my 3-year-old did. And on Friday the 13th, when my father-in-law was about to pass, I was talking to a rabbi friend, and I said to my friend, Josh keeps talking about Damas. I don't know who Damas is. And my rabbi friend wrote the word Damas out in Hebrew and then in Aramaic, and he said, oh, that's the angel of death. And the angel of death, according to the Jewish religion, is a good guy who comes and helps escort people to the afterlife. Well, Damas wasn't like any relative I knew about, so I had to go get my information from a rabbi about this. So there's so much that we don't know. But the first thing I would do, if I heard from somebody I knew about somebody that they didn't know, and they were talking about who this person was visiting them, I would go to that person who was preparing to pass. I would go to their family and I would say, here's your father. Your father's describing this individual. Anybody aware of who this might be? So your caller might want to consider that.
We have another question from Super Witchy Gamer.
Great.
Norene, could you ask Carla her opinion on why someone that has passed on in a traumatic way will often have the spirit leave the body before death and not feel any pain?
That's not uncommon. That's a classical, common description that's given. If someone goes to a medium and they go to a really good medium and they're asking, most people want to know, did you feel pain before you passed? And oftentimes what they will hear is from the medium, who is the conduit with the person in spirit, is that, no, I didn't feel any pain. And we hear this over and over and over again. And then they will hear that they are all right. It's almost as if those on the other side come to collect us before the pain happens. That they come to escort us because that's the time when we need to leave.
Wow. All right, we have another, Donna Gordon. What does Carla think about things being as presented in the movie, What Dreams May Come?
The movies, they can really screw things up. We always talk about that. All of us talk about that. A bunch of us mediums got together not long ago, and we were talking about Flatliners, that old 70s movie.
Yeah.
You tried to induce near-death experiences, and then you had, everybody was confronted with their sins and this, that, and the other, and that one guy, Kiefer Sutherland, got the crap beat out of him, and we were talking about that. And we were talking about some of these movies, how they take something that's real and true, and what they do is they sensationalize it. And the thing that we were talking about is the experience itself is so amazing. Why do they need to sensationalize it? Why do they need to sensationalize it? So Robin Williams, in that particular movie, and that's one of the better ones. That's one of the better ones. Because one of the things that is discussed over and over again by those who have near-death experiences and by those who also are having departing visions, they talk about the color. They talk about the brilliant colors, the intensity of color. When I had my near-death experience, the light was so brilliant, I don't have words to describe it. It was a golden, bright light. And so, as I said, that movie did a semi-okay job of it, but there was some sensationalization in there also. The best thing to do is to look at the words of the experiencers. Hear what it is they have to say when they talk about the warmth of the light or the intensity of the light or the love of the light. As I said earlier, when I was in that psychomantium and those vectors and orbs of light were going through me, that love was so intense. I can't find words to it. The closest I can come to with it is the birth of my children. That's the closest I can come to because it was so intense. Wow. So I think the movies, we take what we like and we leave the rest. And if you talk to experiencers, they will pick out the parts of the movies that might be somewhat true. I don't know anybody who's had a near-death experience that's gotten beaten up by somebody they wronged in their childhood. I haven't heard that one yet. But we do have a life review where we take a look at what we've done that's been positive and maybe some of the things that we've done that haven't been so positive.
I have a question. When you have an experience, but let's see, when you have an experience where it's a possibility you could have died, but you don't quite make that death the death, and something stops it, and you get a voice from the other side that helps you. What is that?
Well, when this voice was coming through. Okay, so which one should I use?
Let me tell you.
My client who had the three beings that were there, they gave her specific information. It will be okay. They told her it would be okay, and it was okay. And she was very near death. When I had my near-death experience, I knew that the voice was comforting me. I knew that the voice was speaking to me and letting me know that I couldn't go into this room that was full of individuals who had already crossed over, that I wasn't allowed in that room. But that at the same time, I was going to be okay. So it's really hard to explain because sometimes the voices come and we get the message intuitively. Other times the voice is really clear and we hear it auditorially. And then there are those times where we can hear it telepathically. But it's always that the experience stays with us for the rest of our lives. We have different types of experiences and dreams. We have those experiences and dreams that are every day and happen, and we don't necessarily remember going to the grocery store. Then there are those traumatic experiences that we may remember, like the death of somebody, or we might remember the date. But then there are those spiritual experiences that happen that stay with us for the rest of our lives. They're just there. And when we begin to think about them, we can feel the feelings that we felt when we experienced them. Can
I tell you this? Okay. I just want to ask you, I know I didn't die. I was about 7, 8 years old. And there was a vacation area that we would always go to, and we went to the river with other kids. You know how you meet kids on vacation, and there was about 6 of us, and there was a bridge that went across the river, and on this bridge it says, "Do not jump off the bridge." Well, we did. So, and then when you jump off the bridge, it's like a waterfall. It wasn't that high off of the bridge, but you would jump into like a waterfall, and the water, all this pressure of the water would go over the bridge, and then you would jump in that area and then kind of like swirl around, and then you'd come up to the top, and then you swim over to the shore. But this one time, I don't know how many times I had already jumped off the bridge, but this one particular time when I jumped off the bridge, I went under, but I didn't come up. And you know how it feels like you've been now forever under that water. And I knew, I said to myself, I'm going to die. This is it. I know I'm going to die. And I was trying to get to the top, but nothing would happen. I couldn't go anywhere because that fast moving water kept rolling me around and rolling me around. And so I just like, okay, this is it. But then, and I know it looked brighter underneath the water, and I heard this voice say to me, just relax.
Okay.
Stop moving around, just relax, and when you do, you will float to the top.
Okay.
And so I did. I just stopped fighting, and I just relaxed, and I floated to the top. And I was so embarrassed because, you don't do that when you're with your other kids, So I swam over to the shore, and they go, oh my God, we thought you died. We thought you drowned. You've been down there forever. Are you okay? Oh yes, I'm fine. I'm fine. You can't let anybody know you were scared to death. So what was that?
You could have had a near-death experience. You could have come close to dying. And one of your helpers came along and told you how to get out of the situation. That sort of thing has been reported before. And you come so close to death that you can sense the intervention from the other side. And it really does sound like, and see, this experience has stayed with you forever.
I'll never forget it. And I thought to myself, oh my God, I was down there for so long, but I didn't need to breathe.
Exactly. Okay, so that's why I'm thinking it might be a true near-death experience, where you were in a situation where you were very close to death, you weren't breathing, and you had intervention from helpers on the other side. And the light, you saw light. Okay?
Yeah, I did. That's weird.
Well, the light, so what you ask yourself is, when you're normally under like that, and you're under for that long, and you're, what would the light be? So it sounds like you had the experience of the voice, and you had the experience of the light, and you were obviously down there for a while, and there was probably, a near-death experience can be a couple of minutes to many minutes. So you have to ask yourself, do I need to go check out what near-death experiences are a little bit more? Also, it could have been a near-death-like experience, which is what Jeffrey Long investigates, where people have these near-death-like experiences, where it's not the tunnel and it's not all the typical stuff, but they have experiences that put them on a path sometimes in life that they constantly question, that they hear a voice, they see a light, they have these constituents that are within the realm of the near-death experience. So you described several that, for me, went ping, 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 near death, near death, near death.
But Carla, when I got out of the water and sat on the shore, I was not out of breath. I was not gasping. I wasn't choking. It was like I just got out of the water and nothing happened.
Okay, and that's another example, okay? Some people, when they come back from a near-death experience, they slam into their bodies and they feel all the physical pain. They feel all the physical pain from the car wreck or from this or from that. When I came back, I found myself turned back in my bed and I didn't feel any different. Physically I felt pretty much the same as I had before it happened.
Okay. Very interesting.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
What? We got another question. Do you have something else to say?
It sounds like you had a near-death-like experience.
Wow. That's
Yep.
very interesting.
Yep.
Okay, well, I'm glad I asked you that. Okay, so now, Tiffany Twisted, I have a question. If we have a near-death experience, such as an accident, does our life really flash before our eyes? How else can that be interpreted?
Some people do have, that's called a life review, and sometimes that does happen in a traditional near-death experience. And what it's a review. It's us taking a look at our life, taking a look at what we learned, taking a look at those moments that we missed out on, taking a look at our loved ones, ourselves, how we've evolved spiritually. Some people don't have that when they have a near-death experience. They don't have a life review. I know a lot of people who have not had life reviews when they've had a near-death experience. But I also know a lot of people who have had that too. And in having that, it's changed their life because they've seen that they need to work more on their spirituality or be more of service or work on a relationship that they've been having a problem with. So different people have had different types of near-death experiences. And I think we can get ourselves into trouble when we become too literal with what's been presented to us by movies or the media with regard to the near-death experience.
Wow. All right, we have another question from Phil M. What do we look like physically in the afterlife? Do we wear clothes?
Well, I'll tell you what I have seen. I have seen all of my loved ones in spirit form, and I knew that was them, and I felt their energy. But then when I do readings, spirits will come to me, and they will be dressed in certain clothing that the sitter will be able to identify.
I've heard that.
So there are different theories about what we look like. We have a soul body, and that soul body is what we wear in the next life. Because, when we cross over from this world to the next, we're not, we're not sitting on top of the throne of some sort of higher power. We're basically in a different dimension where the rules might be a little bit different, the colors more intense, the sounds more intense, but, basically, a lot of people have described seeing people in clothes, wearing regular clothes. Other people wear robes. The spirit body is like kind of almost like a body double, but it doesn't have we don't have the organs that are needed to make the physical body move and work. So it appears to me that we definitely have some sort of form. But like I said, everybody has a different opinion. Here's my thinking, is that if we choose to have a body double, most people describe when the deceased come to visit them, that those that they are seeing look younger and healthier. In my near-death experience, when I saw my mother, uncle, and my grandfather, they all looked incredibly healthy. And I know my uncle was shot to death in Germany, and my grandfather had a horrible death of emphysema, and my mother died from cancer, and she looked awful. So, but they all looked perfectly well. They were happy. And they were dressed in clothing that helped me identify them.
So if you saw them again...
I don't know if that helps at all.
If you saw them again, would they be in the same clothing, or would they have changed those?
Hello?
Oh, yeah. Your video froze. But, Are you still there?
Hello?
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me? Uh-oh. Hold on, guys. Hold on. Okay, hold on. We're having some issues here. Hold on, guys. Hold on. Hold on. I'm gonna put this off for a minute. Hold on, okay? Hear you too. Okay, we're back, everybody. All right. So, do you want me to reread that question?
Sure.
All right. Hold on. Okay, which one was it? Oh, I think we were talking about clothes. Okay. So,
Well, in doing readings, I can tell you that the spirits that show up for me are dressed in clothing that the sitter will recognize. So it's a way of identifying them to the sitter. So yesterday I did a reading with a woman, and her mother came through, and I saw that her mother was wearing an apron, but not a regular apron, one of those kind of white aprons that like a pinafore, and that helped her recognize that that was her mother. And then I talked about the type of dress that she was wearing and the colors she was wearing, and she said, yes, those are the colors. I even know that dress.
wow.
So spirit will come to us in dreams or through a medium in clothing that will help the sitter identify the individual. Now, I also have talked to people who have said that they have had dreams of their loved ones in long robes, and just like easygoing white robes. And then there has been discussion about the body double, where we can choose how we want to look. So if I'm if I'm a grandfather and I'm on the other side and I want to make contact with my grandson, well, I'm not going to look the way I did when I was 24 or 25. I'm going to look the way I did when I was 70 or 80. That way my grandson will know it's me. So I think that we have the flexibility within ourselves when we cross over to decide how it is we choose to appear.
Okay. Another question from Lully Tooby. My mother and I, before her passing, agree that if she had something to say to me, she will come to me in my dreams. She has. However, in my dreams, when she say, listen, I have to tell you something. That's all she said.
Okay, well, obviously this mother has something to tell her daughter. And so what the daughter needs to do is the daughter needs to get a bunch of pictures of her mother, and she needs to put them on a table in her room. And what she needs to do is also have a personal belonging of her mother's on that table along with this. And she needs to spend some time holding this personal article. And then she can close her eyes and visualize her mother. And she can ask her mother to tell her what it is she needs to tell her, and then she can come to her in a dream and pass this message on. And that this is going to take some time, that she'll need to do it every night for not, 1 week, but probably several weeks, maybe several months. But this is how we can make contact with our loved ones, is to have that physical, personal belonging and have the pictures of our loved ones, and then to look at the loved one we really want to make contact with, close our eyes, talk to that image in our head, and then, before we go to sleep, see that loved one again, and then up. How we felt, if we felt sad, glad, mad, tired, if we had a dream about our loved one, if our dream was really symbolic, sometimes that can also be about a loved one. So it's about taking the action to begin making the process of making contact to find out what it is her mother wants to tell her.
Okay. Mama Joe wants to know, can my 4-year-old sister become my guide?
Well, that depends on the agreement that was made before both of them incarnated. So it is a possibility. That's another case of you might want to gather up some pictures of the 4-year-old sister, and I'm assuming the sister has crossed, is deceased, has crossed.
I don't know, she didn't say.
Yeah, but learning how to make that contact, somehow make that contact. If this person is still alive, I'm going to assume this 4-year-old has crossed over. But getting together a bunch of photographs, some personal belongings, and asking this 4-year-old who has crossed to come visit in dreams. And she can also pose the question, are you one of my guides? And just see what happens.
Oh, I guess I guess she did pass over. She said in chat, yes.
That was the sense. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, she's the 4. Yeah. I don't think she's a guide. I'm not getting that she's a guide, but she's definitely there. And so the woman in the chat needs to begin the process of connection, because the 4-year-old has tried to make connection. She's tried.
Wow, interesting.
So, okay.
All right, next question. Karen Hirsch, what if you pass with an evil spirit attached to you?
Well, this is kind of how I look at this. An evil spirit is just a person with a bad attitude who has crossed over. It's a person who created havoc on this side, and so they're going to create havoc on the other side. So it's my responsibility to have some boundaries. There was this guy. Okay, I'm going to tell you this story.
Okay.
There was this guy lovely guy, who had this spirit in his house, and the spirit was in love with him. And the reason why she was in love with him was because he would never set any boundaries with her. And this spirit would collect his cell phones and put him in all these different places. And I kept saying to him, you've got to set some boundaries. She's not going to leave you alone until you tell her, you need to leave me alone. You are upsetting my life. You are upsetting my family. And he said to me after, we had this conversation over and over again. And finally he told me, I can't be mean. And I just looked at him. And I said, what do you mean you can't be mean? She's going to be around until you tell her to go. Yeah. So we have to have boundaries ourselves. That's about taking some personal responsibility. Like I said with that guy who was, scaring my clients in that 100-year-old house. That just was not going to fly for me, because I had a business to run. So he could stay there and be there, but scaring my clients wasn't going to happen.
I have another question from Monica. Do our animals ever meet us at death?
I think they do, because my mother-in-law had a departing vision experience with one of her pets. She felt her pet rub against her leg at the exact moment that pet was passing at the vet. And I know that I have sensed, I'm a big animal person. I was told not to write about animal after-death contact because it would diminish my reliability, but I did it anyway. I wrote about it anyway. And I do think our pets can greet us. I've collected a lot of departing visions where the pets are there, or where there's been a near-death experience, and the pets have been there. So,
really?
yes, most definitely, I do think so.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. So they come and visit you when you're ready to pass, or when you pass on?
Well, what they do is, they have spirits. They have little souls. So there was one account where a man was greeted by every single pet he had ever had. That was his departing vision. And as Kubler-Ross said, we will be greeted by who we need to be met by. And so for him, that's who he was met by. I got an account from South Africa where a woman had a near-death experience, and she was greeted by one of her pets in the experience. Wow. So it appears to me to be just the same as it is with humans. Anything with a soul will greet us. And I know for a fact that all of my pets will be there for me when it's my time.
All right, I have another one from Tina Nichols. Why did my husband suffer so long for 10 hours? Why do they suffer that long?
There are several ideas behind this. Number one, the physical body. I am watching this little girl. Her physical body, she is so ready to go, and her physical body is just hanging on. And one of the people who is taking care of her is learning a lot watching her go through this. I mean, she's learning a lot about her spirituality. She's learning a lot about departing visions. So maybe her suffering is for her caretaker, because her caretaker is learning things. Because, what's interesting is that mothers will be mothers until the very end, even when they're crossed over and on the other side. And fathers will be fathers, and sons and daughters will be sons and daughters. So if a mother feels like she still needs to be there for her daughter for some reason, she will hang on. She'll stick around. Then there is the flip side, which says that the person who is preparing to cross is in the process of learning something. That they learn it looks like they are suffering terribly, when in reality, they're really learning something before they move on.
And I have a question as well. When the person is still alive, but they're ready to go, like my sister said, I know I'm dying, and the loved ones that are in the room, okay, there's two questions. They'll say, "Oh, don't go, hang on, stay with us." What happens?
Well, a lot of times they'll hang on, and I've seen that happen over and over and over again. Not Kenneth Ring, but one of the researchers tells the story about a little boy who was really, really ready to move on, and his family kept praying over him and begging him to stay and lamenting, and then a family minister had a dream. And in the dream, the little boy had come to him and said, "Please tell my family to quit praying for me. I really need to move on, and I can't as long as they are doing this." And so the minister went to the family and shared this with the family, and the family stopped, and the little boy passed. So I know for a fact, and have seen this and watched this, where there was this one woman who I worked with who was in the hospital and dying from a terminal illness, and her children were not prepared for her to leave. Her illness had come upon her suddenly, and she was in misery, but she wouldn't move on, and she was having departing visions, and I would say to her, it's okay for you to move on. They're going to be okay. But then in talking to them, there was a lot of, I don't know what I'm going to do without her. I don't know how I'm going to be. I don't know if my life will ever be the same. And I did finally have to say to them, I think your mom is hanging on because of you guys. and she's really not in a great place, and she does need to move on. And I hate to be the bad guy who has to pass this on to you, but you guys need to let your mom go. And so they sat by the bed and they told her they loved her, and there were conversations about what she had done for them, and then they said, you can go now, and she passed very peacefully.
And then on the other hand, when this is happening, instead of saying, oh, stay with us, don't go, but then they say, it's okay, you can go. Just, it's okay, everybody's fine here, you can go. Then and like you're giving them the okay to pass on because maybe they don't want to, I don't know. And that's when they go, right? They'll just let go.
There was the time when my sister was telling my father-in-law, go to the light, you can go to the light. And he was like, I'm not ready yet. I don't know. He just glared at her. So I know she had the highest good in mind, but it wasn't working. But a mother or a father or anybody who cares about anybody, that bond of love doesn't dissipate just because somebody gets sick. They will still stick around if they feel like their loved ones can't handle it or their loved ones need them. They will stick around until a certain date. They will stick around for a couple of weeks. They will stick around to make sure the will's in order. They will stick around, and they will stick around. They will stick around. One guy, there was some sort of family business that needed to be taken care of, and he stuck around for that. So,
okay,
yes.
What do you mean stuck around? You mean he wouldn't die?
No, they won't die.
They won't die. I know somebody right now like that. He's an old man.
Yeah.
He's 95 years old.
Yeah.
And last year, the doctors gave him 2 weeks to 2 months, and he is still alive. He doesn't want to die, and he's still alive.
Okay, and so there's something that needs to be done. Either he's scared to die, or he has unfinished business. And so it's one of the two things. So with this guy, I'd kind of want to know why he's sticking around.
I think he's afraid to die. He turned atheist, and I think he's afraid to die. Because I've heard him say, we don't go anywhere. When we die, we die. We're buried in the ground, and that's it. That's what he believes.
Okay, so he obviously has an undealt with grief issue. That's what that's about. I've worked with lots and lots of elderly people and terminally ill people who have had some sort of grief issue, and they have decided that when you die, you just become worm food.
Yeah.
So they will hang on, and they will hang on, and they will hang on because they really believe that you just disappear when you cross over. And so with people like that, usually what I do is I slowly begin to introduce the scientific research that's been done on near-death experiences or departing visions. And I'll start by saying something like, I was with somebody not long ago who had a really unusual experience. They saw all of their deceased relatives in the room with them, and they started talking to them. And then what happened was they gently crossed over. So I will open up the door just to see if there is, kind of inviting them to discuss some of this stuff. And then if they say, oh, that's ridiculous, I'll say, well, there are all these other accounts too. This seems to be real common that people have these experiences where right before they die, they somebody comes to visit them who's already deceased. It's not the postman or the grocery store clerk or somebody who's alive. It's somebody who's deceased who comes and says, and comforts them and lets them know it's going to be okay if they move on. And so I gently feed them little bits of information. And that seems to kind of begin to open up the door. So even if they're not talking to me about it, they're at least thinking about it.
I don't know. Guys, I have 3 more questions and that's it, okay? No more. Royce already gave them to me, so 3 questions and this is it. And I have them already. All right, John Rad wants to know, he says, I heard we can choose our parents. Is that true?
I believe that. Now, my parents were both train wreck individuals. And if somebody had said that to me while I was in my healing process from some of the things that went on, I think I would have walked out of the room or pitched a fit or done something. Here's what I do believe. I believe that we have mentors that we discuss possibilities with. And what we do is we lay out a plan, but free will is involved. So the plan is not always going to be predictable. So I have my free will, my parents had their free will, so things can change. So my mentors helped me lay out a plan that would help me evolve spiritually, and it was for my highest good. But all parties involved in this play had free will. And so this too impacted what happened and what continues to happen. So I don't think anything is set in stone. That's just my belief.
Okay. Kathy Montag, has Carla ever seen someone who has lost cognitive functioning due to dementia suddenly communicate as if they did before falling ill when approaching death?
Yes, it just happened recently. A woman who is suffering from dementia, and she is just, she's like, when she is in her dementia, it's gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. And then on Mother's Day, she became very lucid. Very lucid. She was the same person she was before she became ill. All Mother's Day. And then, once Mother's Day passed, well, it was back to the brain dysfunction and some of the other things that go along with this type of illness. People who have been in coma have come to, and they have turned to their loved ones and say, I love you very much. They've carried on lucid conversations, and then they have gone back into coma and passed. Mm-hmm. So yes, this does happen.
Wow. All right, and our last question from Jeremy Lagus. I started having issues with the shadow being. I have never had issues before. Same corner of the room and somewhat sad. I cleaned out that corner 3 weeks ago, and sure enough, there is bag of his clothes.
Okay. Well, the feeling of sadness could be connected to the bag of clothes, which would manifest as a darkness, which could be a loop. And it could be, like I said, it's not the person themselves who has moved to the afterlife is not that person in that corner. But what they're picking up on and sensing is how that person lived their life, the energy of that person when they were here in the physical, and they may have seen a manifestation of that. And so what they could do is visualize that person in their mind's eye and ask, are you happy?
Interesting. Well, that concludes the questioning. Carla, I want to thank you so much for being on the show tonight. It was such a pleasure to meet with you and have you on the show. I'm just thrilled. Thank you so much. Now, do you want to tell the viewers? Now, I have a picture of your I took a picture of your website. So it has your name up there, but what is the URL to your website?
It's www.carla, C-A-R-L-A, Wills, W-I-L-L-S, Brandon, B-R-A-N-D-O-N.com.
And now, do you have an email address if somebody, I noticed some of the viewers wanted to email you.
Sure, they can. It's doctorsbrandon@live.com. So that's D as in dog, R as in Robin, DRS, Brandon, BRANDON, @live.com.
And you're on Facebook as well, right?
I have a Author's Digs page, which is mostly about the books. And then I have another Facebook page, which is just my Carla Wills-Brandon page, marriage and family therapist page. Then, as I said earlier, I have the Departing Vision page. I think it's Deathbed Visions, Departing Visions. I can look real quick here. I never remember what my pages are titled. But then I do have the Jewish afterlife.
I'm really interested in that. Now, is Jewish any different than normal afterlife? Is there a difference, or is it just because of the religion?
No, not much actually. There's not much difference at all. It's called Jewish Afterlife Beliefs. And then the other one is Deathbed Visions, Departing Visions, and let's see, just plug in Deathbed Visions, Departing Visions.
Okay. So did everybody get that? Oh, wow. Well, it was really an interesting show, and so much information, and this was actually very interesting. I really enjoyed it. And I want to thank you so much for being on the show, Carla. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. You know, anytime that you can get your aunt on the show and talk about the Holocaust, and if there's a way that you could bring your computer over there and we can do Skype,
yeah.
I would really love to do a show on the Holocaust.
Well, I'll check with her and see what she says.
Yeah, I would even make it a special show for you guys. If
okay.
Really. And I mean, I would squeeze you in.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Carla. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
It was a pleasure, Norene.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good night, honey. Good night.
Night.
Oh, wow. I so enjoyed that. Did you guys enjoy the show? Okay. Carla, it was just it was such a pleasure to have her on the show. What a great guest. And to my mods, Royce, my main guy, Royce and Crystal and Sweet Annie, thank you so much for modding the show tonight as always. And yes, we have a show on Monday from the show that from last Monday. Let's see, Bruce Barraclaw is coming back, and he will be doing the Rune Stones. And we will be redoing that show. So, yeah, it was really nice of him to return on Monday. So, yes, we do have a show on Monday. And I can't remember my guest for next Thursday. You know, it might be Rob Goutreau with the animals. I'm not sure. He wrote another book on animals in heaven. So, I'm not sure about that. So anyway, so don't forget Monday night, Horsefly Chronicles. We are redoing that show with those ancient rune stones. That was so interesting. And everybody, thanks so much for joining us tonight. And it was such a pleasure to have Carla and to have all of you in the chat room. I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart every week how you join me. It's just I love all you guys. I mean, I know all you guys now. I see your names week after week, and I love you guys. Thank you so much. And no, my sister already died. She died. It was 3 years. It was 3 years Easter. this year that she had passed on. And so everybody, thank you so much. Love you guys, and everybody be safe. Have a wonderful weekend coming up, and we'll have another awesome show on Monday. I can't wait. That Horsefly Chronicles show has really, really caught on. And I think you guys are loving it, aren't you? Yeah. Okay, everybody, I love you so much. I love you guys. Again, thanks to my mod. Thanks to Royce. And Royce, please, everybody, send positive vibes to Royce. He hasn't been feeling well, and he needs our positive vibes and prayers and whatever you can send to him. And Crystal and Sweet Annie, okay? And everybody, thank you so much. Don't forget, you can sign up on Paranormal Zone, paranormalzone.tv, and go to the contact, or send me an email for show reminders, because I did send those out. And always on my Facebook page, I post, and always on the main page of the channel, the event is up. It's up, and Royce knows how to tell you guys how to get reminders off of the YouTube. Anything else? Can't think of anything else. Anyway, still having computer problems, but thank God I had a show tonight. My techie, I have 2 techies, and the one of them is coming back on Sunday to try and figure out what the heck is going on. So, but I'm thankful we had a show tonight anyway. And so I'll see you guys on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend, and love you guys. Okay, good night. Love you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Don't forget to give the show a like, and if you haven't already subscribed, if you would please subscribe. I have over 2 million views now on my channel, and almost 16,000 subscribers. And I did that it's not even been 2 years yet. In June, I think it's June or July 1st, it'll be 2 years that I left Live Sci-Fi and went out on my own. So everybody, thanks so much for helping me make my channel a success. I'm really happy. I love you guys. Good night. Thank you. Good night, everyone.